as the Dormouse said in Alice in Wonderland, logic and proportion have fallen sloppy dead. I'm referring to a recent piece from the Wall Street funded think tank called Third Way. How the Sanders Social Security plan is not progressive. The argument this piece makes is that this is really a giveaway to billionaires. Now, I was a little bit stunned, to be honest, by the illogic of this piece. And while I was in that state of frozen shock, someone else rebutted this piece quite adequately. Our good friend and good friend of the program, Nancy Altman, wrote a piece entitled "Wall Street's Third Way is Absurdly Wrong" about Sanders' Social Security plan. She joins us now. Nancy is co-director of Social Security Works, co-chair of the Strengthened Social Security Coalition and Campaign, and is the co-author of The Battle for Social Security from FDR's Vision to Bush's she is the author of The Battle for Social Security, and the co-author of Social Security Works with Eric Kingston. Nancy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, always a pleasure. And your title, Absurdly Wrong, reminds me of, did you see the movie The Producers?
Yes.
The ending when the jury says, we find the defendants incredibly guilty. Before we get into why Third Way is wrong, I should let our listeners know that in all fairness, and a desire to be fair, we did invite the authors of that their editorial, Jim Kessler and David Brown. We did invite them to come on the program and defend their position with us, and they declined, apparently feeling that I have been too vituperative in my past communications with them, but I would have been happy to have a collegial, very civil discussion with them. For some reason, they were not interested in that. So we will discuss it from our perspective. Why were they wrong, Nancy?
Well, let me first start by giving some background, and that is Third Way, as you recall, there's a fight going on for the hearts and minds of the Democratic Party right now. Third Way was the idea that we needed, after Reagan's revolution, we needed new Democrats that had a third way. But they really, if you look behind the facade, most of their money comes from Wall Street. And they have been fighting for a very long time to cut Social Security. Now, they, I think, are becoming more shrill and more desperate as we go, as expansion starts to take root, as Senator Sanders does so well in the campaign and is pushing expand Social Security, as Hillary Clinton is talking about some expansions to Social Security. So they are getting more and more marginalized. And this latest outburst is, the idea that the senator from Vermont, who daily talks about the billionaire class and rails against it, is somehow doing something where, in the words of the report they put out, that this proposal is substantially tilted towards the wealthy makes no sense. And they do it by playing fast and loose and trying to really obscure rather than clarify what's going on.
Yeah, and we can get into precisely how they do that, but the fact is this is a game they've been playing for a while. There is no doubt a lot of financing available for it, but it's really becoming tougher. And the third way, I guess, is supposed to be between the Republicans and the Democrats. But right? Isn't that the logic?
That's exactly. But it's sort of trying to meld the two. But as others have said, if you the house is burning and one says throw water and some say throw oil, you don't just mix it and throw some water and some oil. Basically, you've got to, these are our fundamental differences of values, and we should be fighting them out. And fortunately, with Social Security, the American people are not divided. They're overwhelmingly on the side of no cuts to Social Security and expand Social Security. So the third way group is really an outlier, but they try to make it sound like they're in the middle because they're in the middle of the elites in Washington.
Right. And I always say, I like the fire analogy. The one I always use is if I don't care for peanut butter and I don't care for lima beans, you're not going to throw me with a peanut butter and lima bean sandwich. It's just same logic. But so in this case, and they've been playing this game for a long time, pushing for Social Security cuts and so on. Now, in this case, and they did a vicious attack on Senator Elizabeth Warren at one point over this issue, as you mentioned. They warned the Democratic Party not to, quote unquote, as you quote, follow Senator Warren over the populist cliff. And she's standing with 90% of Democrats and, of course, enormously popular. And so is Social Security itself. But facts notwithstanding, they keep wailing away at this. And what did they get wrong this time around?
Well, they got a number of things wrong. Let me start with Senator Sanders' proposal, because that's what they were attacking. So what he proposes is an across-the-board increase in Social Security benefits for the 60 million Social Security beneficiaries, but he provides those benefits in an extremely progressive way. So the lowest income people would get a larger percentage of their pre-retirement earnings in this additional benefit than higher income people. He also increases the minimum benefit for people who've worked a lifetime at low wages to ensure that they don't retire into poverty. He also proposes a more accurate cost of living adjustment that reflects the health costs and other costs experienced by seniors and people with disabilities, which of course have risen much faster than inflation generally. And he pays for it all by requiring those who have incomes over $250,000. Now, that's a small percentage of the population. 6% have over $118,000. So it's a very small percentage of the population, the wealthiest part of the population, and requires them to pay simply the same rate that everyone else pays on their incomes. And so you could just hear by the outline, this is very progressive. It's additional benefits that are progressively provided. It's keeping benefits pace with inflation, which is just keeping the program accurate and keeping benefits from eroding, and requiring those at the top to pay for it. So it's quite a bit of mental gymnastics to somehow spin this as favor a substantial tilt towards the wealthy, as they say.
Well, and we're talking with Nancy Altman of Social Security Works about the latest broadside from Third Way, the so-called Third Way group, about Social Security and the Bernie Sanders plan. And I'll admit, as I mentioned in my opening, that I did go into a slight, altered state reading this because it was so extraordinary. But if I recall correctly, I believe that one of the ways they made it seem unprogressive, meaning favoring billionaires, is that they talked about what billionaires would receive without talking about what billionaires would pay.
Exactly. That was the first. They have a number of slippery ways of viewing this to come out with the idea that this is not progressive. The first is exactly what you say. The Sanders proposal over the next 75 years will raise about $11.9 trillion. That's only coming from the wealthiest among us. The benefits that are being paid are spread through the population, and most of the population, 73 out of 4 seniors, have incomes under $50,000. So the bulk of the money is going to low and moderate income people. But when they completely take off the table the fact that all of this money is going to be paid by the wealthiest among us, but they raise it for one point. It's not that they didn't read the bill closely enough and didn't know it was in there, because they say that taxing these poor billionaires is going to exhaust their resources and they won't be able to pay for, it's going to crowd out, in their language, spending on children, spending on infrastructure, which is just crazy. This enormous upward redistribution of wealth. All this proposal is saying is that they should pay the exact same rate. It's not progressive rate. It's the exact same rate as others pay. And there is no question there is room, and they should be required to pay more in taxes. But they say, first of all, they ignore that they're paying all of this in, except to say, oh yeah, but this is going to crowd out other progressive spending. So they're trying to take shots both ways.
Well, yeah, and it's frightening in a way to think that they could even imagine that would be an effective way to go. We're talking with Nancy Altman of Social Security Works, and by the way, it also betrays, well, I don't want to say a lack of understanding, because that implies that they're just genuinely. I'm in an awkward spot here, because here the guy said I wasn't nice to him. I have the choice here of either saying it's ignorant or it's mendacious, and I don't think they're ignorant. Okay, but it's.
But let me just interrupt, because you say that you, I've forgotten exactly the word you used, but that. Frightening, I think, is what you said, that they do this. I think it's close to laughable. I think that they are really getting so desperate. They are so marginalized at this point, so out of the conversation, that they are going to more and more extremes. And to say that the most liberal member of the United States Senate is somehow really secretly coddling the rich. They're accusing Senator Sanders of either ignorance or mendacity, and he's not either.
Right. And people might be listening to this, Nancy Altman, and saying, well, then if they're so marginalized now, then why are you guys even talking about them? And I think there is an answer to that, but I want your thoughts on it. I think the answer to that is because however embarrassing these guys have become in their spiral down into well-deserved obscurity. No wonder they didn't come on. But the fact is, they do represent, in my view, a culture and a way of thinking that has reached kind of epidemic proportions among our political and economic elites. And I don't know if you agree with that.
I agree 100%. There are a number of people who are saying that there is a battle going on for the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. For a very long time, we've had this elite consensus, which really is out of touch with the American people, which I think is why both a candidate like Senator Sanders would be doing so well. At the same time, you got a candidate like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz doing well. It's because the American people are frustrated. The people who are supposed to work for them are not listening to them, and they're looking for someone who will take on the system. So I think we are right, even though they maybe it's they still wield, maybe marginalized is not right, because they still, I think, unfortunately, may wield a lot of power, not only among Republicans but among Democrats. And in fact, I'm very concerned that Hillary Clinton, it was Bill Clinton who considered himself third way. And right. Hillary Clinton is if you really parse what she says about Social Security, she could be basically saying what the third way people are saying. Her attitude, her statements about Social Security fit completely with these third way's Social Security plan, which is modeled after the Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson plan, which really raises benefits for the very low but cuts them for the middle class.
Right, and protects right. the tax status of the wealthy.
Yes.
And I think it's important, Nancy Altman, and I guess this gets to our final point. I think it's important to note that as ludicrous as it may seem to call Bernie Sanders, for example, not a progressive or a servant of the billionaire class, it gets to this third way idea that was born in the 90s in the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton. I think this idea that you could sell to people with progressive impulses the idea that the Wall Street agenda really is progressive. And I think it worked for a while. I think this is a desperate attempt to keep it alive. And I think your expressed concern about Hillary Clinton makes a lot of sense, which to me, doesn't that mean she could put that to rest by vowing never to allow cuts to Social Security?
Yes, and in fact, our organization and the Progressive Change Campaign Committee have issued a challenge to her to promise to, if she were president, to veto any bill that had Social Security cuts in it. I know that Senator Sanders would definitely veto a bill like that. And I think the American people should know, especially because she's doing so well with seniors. I think they don't understand there's a real danger to their Social Security in her candidacy.
Absolutely. Well said. And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But as always, great to talk to you. As always, thanks for coming on the program. Nancy Altman, co-director of Social Security Works. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.